Warning, this podcast does not introduce any new information outside the Foundation's curriculum. Listener discretion is advised.
Hey there, Central Liners. Welcome back to Real Doctors, Real Friends, the official podcast guiding you through the Foundations of Medicine course. I'm Roshan, your host, and with me is my partner in medical education, Shereen.
Hello, Central Liners. Congratulations on successfully navigating Week 11. This week marked a critical shift in your foundational knowledge, moving from the world of bacterial structure and antibiotics to the complex yet elegantly simple domain of virology.
And that shift in focus is deliberate. Infectious diseases context, as we've discussed, is truly a long game that integrates across every system block you will encounter.
Absolutely. And virology provides a fantastic platform for integrating concepts across immunology, genetics, and public health, preparing you not just for exams, but for clinical practice.
Absolutely. Viruses are arguably the most abundant and diverse biological entities on the planet. However, their elegance lies in their necessity for survival. They are inherently simple and cannot function independently, instead requiring host cells, essentially harnessing their cellular machinery to replicate their genomes. This fundamental principle, total host dependency, underpins all viral pathogenesis.
And understanding viral structure is paramount to predicting clinical behavior and public health risks. For instance, classifying viruses based on the presence or absence of a viral envelope gives us huge clues about transmission. Viruses like Rotavirus, Norovirus, and Enterovirus are non-enveloped, meaning they are physically hardy and resistant to environmental challenges. This explains why non-enveloped viruses are major culprits in fomite transmission, such as norovirus outbreaks often seen in crowded settings.
In contrast, envelope viruses, which include Influenza A and the herpes virus family, are more fragile. Speaking of Influenza A, this is our archetype for understanding viral evolution and pandemic potential. Its genome is segmented RNA. This segmentation is the structural key that allows for two critical and distinct evolutionary mechanisms that must be mastered by every future clinician.
Absolutely. The first is antigenic drift, which involves small cumulative changes in the virus resulting from point mutations over time. This continuous, slow process is why we must reformulate the seasonal influenza vaccine annually. The circulating strains are constantly drifting away from previous ones.
The mechanism that keeps public health officials up at night, however, is antigenic shift. This involves a major abrupt change caused by reassortment, where a host is infected by two different strains simultaneously, leading to a new hybrid virus. This reassortment event is what generates novel strains with pandemic potential.
Moving into clinical virology, the herpes virus family presents classic scenarios because of their ability to establish latency. Varicella zoster virus, for example, causes chickenpox upon initial infection and then remains dormant within neural structures, specifically the dorsal root ganglia.
Reactivation of this latent virus manifests as shingles, typically presenting as a painful vesicular rash following a dermatomal distribution. Clinically, we emphasize prevention. The main risk factor for reactivation is increasing age, specifically adults over 50 years.
Our central liners should know that the current recommendation is the shingles recombinant vaccine, which uses an adjuvated glycoprotein E component. This is recommended for adults aged 50 and over, regardless of whether they had previous chickenpox infection or vaccination.
On the diagnostic front, precision is vital when managing symptomatic herpes infections such as vulvar ulcers caused by herpes simplex virus or HSV in a patient like Lauren in our case study. The gold standard for diagnosis is nucleic acid amplification, or PCR, performed on a lesion swab. This process allows for the rapid detection of viral genomes directly from the clinical sample.
And tying this back to respiratory viruses, we reviewed the management of influenza-like illness, or ILI.
Another acronym.
I wasn't even sure that was a real acronym, but
You
it
thought
is a
AI
real.
made that up.
I thought AI made that up, honestly. But why am I surprised? I mean, this is the thing in medicine.
It picked your part of the script to put it in.
Exactly. It knew it. So we reviewed the management of influenza-like illness, or ILI, defined as a temperature above 37.8 degrees centigrade, accompanied by a cough and sore throat, while non-COVID respiratory viral infections are primarily managed with symptomatic treatment, such as acetaminophen or ibuprofen and oral fluids. We must consider antiviral medication like oseltamivir for patients in high-risk groups.
And again, to clarify, that would be if you are concerned or have confirmed influenza. Those high-risk populations, which include adults over 65, children under 5, pregnant individuals, those with heart or pulmonary disease, and at this point in time, people with elevated class obesity, so BMI greater than 40, or immunosuppression benefit from vaccination, which protects against severe outcomes, hospitalization, and carries a 10 to 25% lower risk of death. I am really, and I know this ties into section number 3, but I think with both shingles as well as influenza, I think there are so many connections that it can actually be made to, I mean, we talked about it in the script already, about immunology, genetics, but public health is a really big component, whether it's with the vaccination, first of all, not being covered for shingles above the age of 50, unless you're at high risk. And for something that has such incredible morbidity in our population, why don't we see that? So from a public health standpoint, why don't we see that? And then some of the interesting questions we got today from the class, which I was grappling with when I started practice is, well, if you get the chickenpox vaccine when you're younger, can you still get shingles?
I'm curious about that too.
And so, you can, right? Because it's an inactive virus that's provided to you. So it can actually lay dormant. Right? And so if, the time happens when the virus comes out of dormancy, out of its latency, then that's when you could get shingles. So I actually saw a case like that in a very young individual earlier in my career where they had the chickenpox vaccine. And that's how I had to relearn about how that was a possibility. The other thing that's quite relevant is now that we're seeing younger and younger populations with shingles, we always wonder, is it valuable or valid to immunize them shortly afterwards? And that data is not the strongest, even for some of our older population. After a shingles infection, it is kind of recommended that you look at a vaccination about a year afterwards, just to lower your overall risk.
Because it can happen again, right? It's not
because
like
in theory it can happen
you have
again.
it and then you're protected for life.
Right? Can lay dormant again, can hide out and then come back during a period of stress, immunosuppression.
See, that's the thing. What's the trigger? And I think there are a lot of open questions around what the trigger is for developing shingles, but I think stress is a really big one.
I think stress is a really big one.
Huge one.
Yep.
Well, this week's discussion requires us to step back and examine how these microscopic pathogens translate into macroscopic impact within a complex human system, which brings us to the importance of integration. My favorite.
Couldn't agree more. If reflecting on the application of infectious disease content, this idea of the quote-unquote long game is perfectly illustrated in a couple of instances. Firstly, when we look at complications like infective endocarditis, or IE, as it's affectionately called,
of course,
is a serious infection of the heart's endocardium. And while typically bacterial, its existence forces us to think beyond single organ systems. The infectious diseases content you are mastering now, whether bacterial, viral, or fungal, will resurface, lay dormant, if you will, until other blocks or other systems present themselves and become reactivated, emphasizing that a microbe doesn't respect system boundaries. And I do actually want to highlight, I just read an incredible, I listen to, right? Because I listen to books, I don't necessarily read them. The Viral Underclass by Stephen Thrasher, an academic specifically sort of laying out the connections between viral pandemics and specifically the HIV crisis in the 80s and 90s and the COVID pandemic and how it cuts across social classes and how there is essentially this viral underclass.
Yeah.
And it sounds very, very scandalous when you put it that way, but it's very well put that when we are in lower socioeconomic status or we are in a vulnerable state or we're in a vulnerable class, we are more at risk of not only contracting the virus, but also being affected by the virus from an economic standpoint, from a social standpoint, even if you don't actually get the virus yourself. So it's a fascinating read. And I mean, I don't know if it's totally appropriate for medical school, like if we could integrate it into the curriculum. But when we're talking about integration, viruses, even more so than bacteria or fungi, are great examples of how disease cuts across so many different areas in life.
And it's true, like things like a lower socioeconomic status have been associated with poor immune function, which would render a person more susceptible to infection, not to mention issues related to recovering from that infection, complications that can occur on top of other things like economic, what if you can't take time off work?
Precisely.
Or what if you do take time off work and you lose your job? So, there's lots of complex factors that we need to consider. So as we're saying, that integrative view extends beyond organ systems and into the social and ethical context of patient care. Our harm reduction module stressed that effective medical practice requires comprehensive health promotion, especially when dealing with vulnerable populations facing substance use disorder. But I think health promotion even applies to things like hygiene, preventing infection from occurring in the first place, especially in those populations where they might be more vulnerable from a physiological perspective too.
A critical component of this is the physician preparedness in addressing complex pain management, including the appropriate use of opioids, which we touched upon earlier in the block, which necessitates training in overdose mitigation strategies like having naloxone readily available. Furthermore, harm reduction is intrinsically linked to advocacy.
Yeah. And this is really timely because we're going to be having our hands-on naloxone training coming up soon. So that's awesome. See, there is a method to our madness, I think. So this concept requires recognizing and actively mitigating structural barriers that impede health equity. For example, Indigenous individuals often face difficulties accessing preventative care, such as reliable vaccine clinics due to complex jurisdictional gaps between federal and provincial governments, which was an issue highlighted in our curriculum as a critical consideration for building trust. This reinforces that demonstrating cultural safety and engaging in effective communication are foundational requirements for practicing medicine.
And this was extremely well highlighted and discussed today with a small but mighty group during our Story of the Week with John. So if people have an opportunity to actually go back and review that lecture, again, it doesn't have any consequence on the final exam, but highly recommend because we were able to dive into some very interesting conversations around how our political forces and social forces ultimately play a role. All right, Central Liners, let's wrap up this review by sharing the feedback you provided in our episode 10 polls. Your participation directly informs how we structure the Foundation's curriculum and emphasizes the importance of utilizing a peer support network.
Now, we had a fierce competition in our crowdsourcing study strategy poll. Retrieval practice clinched the top spot at 50%, validating the efficacy of using techniques like blank sheet recall to actively test yourselves on drug mechanisms and the spectra of activity.
Following closely behind was utilizing concrete examples at 31%, confirming that applying abstract drug properties to specific clinical scenarios is vital for mastery.
And dual coding garnered 12%, while interleaved practice rounded out the results at 8%.
And I wonder maybe if this will apply to the review session where we might match up study strategies with how we plan to present the overall review of the
Yeah,
course.
interesting.
So next we put our own taste to the tests of friendship. Our Pop-Tarts Your Jam. And it was split right down the middle, just like a packet of Pop-Tarts. And perfectly balanced. 50% of the central liners said yes. Although, okay, I do have to say, I don't think I've ever seen two Pop-Tarts exactly the same.
Yeah.
It's like a snowflake type of thing.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's part of its appeal.
Yeah.
Appreciating the structural integrity of the Pop-Tart, analogous to the thick peptidoglycan layer of gram-positive bacteria.
Gross. The other 50% said no, preferring structures that lack a stable barrier, much like the difficulty in visualizing atypical bacteria without a defined cell wall. Now, finally, our measure of good taste. Are you a fan of Weird Al Yankovic?
The majority, 57% of central liners said yes, they are a big fan. They connect this appreciation to valuing critical reflection and creative approaches to learning and problem solving.
Yeah, he was very creative.
Yes.
We'll give him that, absolutely. The remaining 43% said kind of, but not diehard fans, prioritizing mastery of the clinical knowledge base while acknowledging that coping and self-reflection are necessary for physician development.
Now it's time for some new polls and new discussion. Since we're getting close to the end of foundations, we've decided to make these a little bit more lighthearted while still linking back to core principles.
In virology, we classify viruses based on their structural resilience. Non-enveloped viruses, like the hardy Norovirus, are famously difficult to kill, surviving long trips on cruise ships. Which foundational science concept most accurately reflects your state of mind as you approach the final exam? Is it A, you are like a non-enveloped virus, very hardy, you're structurally stable, resisting all environmental stress, capable of surviving on any surface indefinitely?
Or are you B, an enveloped virus? I require constant external support like coffee and study groups and will quickly disintegrate if separated from my host cell, my bed.
I mean,
That's good.
great.
That's pretty good.
Or are you option C, reflecting antigenic drift? You're accumulating small changes daily, that incremental progress, resulting in continuous creeping intellectual mutation in a good way.
In a good way.
In a good way.
And then lastly, latent herpes virus. I appear outwardly normal, but inside I'm silently replicating existential stress in my dorsal root ganglia. These are excellent. And we will have to admit AI came up with this. Hopefully in our end of year podcast season finale, we'll describe how much AI has actually come to become a part of foundations because it has transformed what we are doing now and in the future.
Yeah. Now, we mentioned cruise ships, and I know it came up in some of the discussions in class. So speaking of that, speaking of norovirus, and especially as we're starting to wrap up foundations, and, you know, we're starting to look beyond foundations. What is your ideal vacation, Roshan?
Every year we ask this. And still every year, if I'm going to be honest, it's still a bit of a blank.
Yeah.
And I mean, I know in past years I've kind of said something, and I don't know. Like, I'm not a person that has genuinely looked ahead at vacation in my adult years.
Yeah.
In my childhood years, yes. So what I will do is I will go back to my childhood years and try to remember what was
Your best
exciting and
vacation.
fun for me.
Yeah.
And I think it was where we did something. And that does relate to why I think I struggle with vacations now. Because most of the time, because it's easier for the family, and my wife really likes it, and I want to make sure that, and she likes vacation more than I do. Is just going to a sunny place, sort of vegging out.
All-inclusive?
All-inclusive.
All-inclusive resort. That is my
resort,
vote.
Right?
Yeah, that's my ideal vacation.
But what did I like doing? When I was a kid, my dad made it a point for us to do vacations where we would go to like Yellowstone National Park.
Yeah.
Right? And we drove across the country.
Like road trip.
Road trip.
Okay.
I love road trips.
Okay.
And road trips where there's a purpose.
Okay.
I do like aimless road trips too,
Yeah.
but that I could never convince my wife to do.
I don't
like,
think
in
I've
any way,
ever
shape, or
been
form.
on an aimless road trip.
Yeah, and to be fair, neither have I.
Yeah.
I've never been on an aimless road trip.
There's always a destination.
There's always a destination, but I would love to explore that.
Yeah.
I loved RVs.
Oh my gosh.
I loved RVs.
No.
Yes. Okay, here we go.
I would never. I would never.
So we're both no on cruise ships,
Yeah,
but we're
like
split on
100%.
RVs.
Yeah.
Tell me why no RVs.
I want to be comfortable, and I feel like a lot of RVs, like the space is confined. It's probably not going to be as comfortable as like a hotel room in a resort. Like if I'm on a vacation, I want to pamper myself. I want to.
You have not seen some of these RVs, though, have you? Like the $200,000-$300,000 RVs. Not that I would buy that, but I would.
Like
I
the
don't know if I
ones
would
that
rent
look
them.
like a huge bus.
Yes. I just
Maybe.
maybe.
Then-
But then if you're spending that much money, might as well go. Yeah.
Yeah, you know.
I get it. That it's definitely a irrational desire.
I'm thinking of like a typical RV or like a trailer.
But see, I don't mind that either.
Really?
But then when you're talking about Norovirus, with two young kids below the age of 5, everyone's getting sick.
Everybody. So, okay, let's take it a step further.
Mm-hmm.
Would camping be a fun vacation for you?
I'm surprised it hasn't come up yet. I actually like camping because
Yeah?
it's something to do.
Like
and the
real
only
camping?
So to be
In
fair,
a tent
Oh yeah,
in the wilderness with
Like,
no running water and like a bathroom.
Yeah, I did that when I was growing up.
And you liked it?
Yeah, I did.
Oh my God.
I did. I went through a phase where I think as a teenager, I felt that wasn't my style.
Yeah.
But we did that growing up.
Okay.
And then when
I never did.
And when I tell my wife that she says the typical, because she's first
typical
generation,
first generation thing.
immigrant, which is why did we leave to come here and camp?
Yeah, to be in a tent. See, that was my parents' philosophy. Like, why would I have a house? And I have a house with all of the comforts in a nice neighborhood. Why would I go in the wilderness with a tent and like possibly dangerous animals and bugs?
I think this would, and I don't think it's adequately captured in the polls that we have, but it would be great to get some qualitative data from the central liners. If anyone's willing to share as to what it feels like to camp for them, because I think a lot of people here, especially in Canada and the United States, really love camping, like Western Europe, and it's fairly common there as well.
Yeah.
I enjoy it because it's about doing something.
Yeah.
I don't know if I'm a big great outdoors type of guy.
Yeah.
But I like doing something.
Okay.
And I think that's what it is. Upon reflection over the last few years about what is it that makes me happy and what is it that I enjoy, it's just about doing something.
Yeah.
And I think that's what appeals to me
Like
about
being
camping.
productive,
Yeah.
building a tent, building a fire.
Building a fire. I love cooking, right? I'm not great at it, but I'm okay at it. So trying to make do with what you have, trying to figure out where to go to the bathroom is like, and so I think there's a curiosity about what could possibly come up.
Yeah.
And then an opportunity for creativity.
Yeah.
I think the only part of me is because I'm a little bit of a paranoid scaredy cat is just the safety concerns. I think that is the only last thing because I'm still very much a bit of a scaredy cat.
Yeah.
So I think if I could feel safe wherever the campground was.
Yeah.
And that was something that I never experienced when I was a kid.
Yeah.
Because I don't think that crops into your mind as
No,
much.
because you're with your family.
You're with your family,
Yeah,
right?
you-
So you're with
you
your
trust
protector.
them.
But now I'm the one that's supposed to protect them.
You're the responsible one now.
And my son's afraid of the big bad wolf. So nonstop, Julian's going to be asking big bad wolf, and he's like, "Stop saying that, Julian."
Especially
Now
at
I'm worried
nightfall.
about the big bad wolf.
Exactly. You know what I would try? I would try glamping.
I think we've talked about this before.
I would do that.
And Kat's game for glamping. And I do think that is something that I'm fine with, that healthy medium.
Yeah.
Here's the one thing that we have both agreed on.
Yeah.
Not agreed on. She never actually confirms it. That's not fair. But I keep saying, we'll go in an RV.
Yeah.
You and my oldest will stay in the RV.
Okay.
Me and the youngest, once he gets less scared, because I think he'll be, we'll hang out in the tent.
Okay.
And that way we have the best of both worlds. You guys get the RV, we'll
Yeah.
get the tent, and that way we have a washroom.
Okay.
So everyone's happy that
Yeah.
way. We can cook reasonably. We
Yeah.
can sit around either outside or inside.
Yeah.
Right? And we can probably get away with, I'd say, most of what we need.
Yeah.
Mostly.
Yeah.
Right? Especially if I'm cooking. That I think that's a reasonable compromise. But glamping is something that's come up as well. The problem is trying to book you can't do
That's
this
tough.
last minute with kids.
No.
Right? Like you
Gotta
have to
plan in
book
advance.
way in advance.
Yeah.
And with our schedules being all over the place with kids and not knowing if they're sick or whatever, it's something that hasn't transpired yet.
You're better off getting an RV and you get free parking at Walmart parking lots.
That's right. That is
Access to all of the comforts you can wish for. So cast your votes, Central Liners. We look forward to reviewing your responses and seeing what the consensus is next week.
Have a restful weekend and keep working hard on those core foundational principles. Take care, everyone.